Hello students. Now let's move on to deadlock prevention. So you know that for a deadlock to occur, it should satisfy all the four conditions: mutual exclusion, hold and wait, no preemption, and circular wait. So the idea behind deadlock prevention is if you want to avoid a deadlock, then you should make sure that one of these four conditions does not hold. Okay, that is, ensure that one of these conditions does not hold is the idea behind deadlock prevention. So coming to mutual exclusion. So you know that mutual exclusion rule was written for resources that cannot be shared. So we will now make sure that resources are shared. So if they are shared, then there is no chance of mutual exclusion, right? So if we bring in resources that are shareable, then mutual exclusion cannot happen. Okay. Yeah. Hold and wait. So earlier the concept for hold and wait was the processes were holding the resources and also requesting for the other resources held by the other processors. So we have to break the chain of hold and wait. That is through guaranteeing that whenever a process requests a resource, it does not hold any other resources. That is, for example, if P1 wants R1, then if P1 held any resources, then it should release it. Okay, only then it can request for the other resources. That is, it requires processes to request. Either it has to release all the resources it was holding before if it wants any other resources, or what it can do is whenever it is requesting for a resource, it should be allocated all of its resources before it begins its execution. Or you can also do one thing: you can allow the process to request resources only when the process has none. So I will take the first concept. See, let's say there is a scenario wherein you want to read a data from a tape drive. Okay, you want to read from data from a tape drive, then write it into a disk drive, and then give it to the printer to print that document. Okay, so there is a process that takes care of reading data from the tape drive, writing into the disk drive, and then printing it. Okay, so if this process wants to execute this job, then it needs to have all these three resources allocated to it. So this is the scenario. So if this process wants to perform all these three tasks, then all the three resources should be allocated to P. Okay, yeah. So but there is a disadvantage in this: it is low resource utilization. Why? Because when these three resources are allocated to P, right, that is, when it uses this tape drive, it keeps D, that is disk drive, and printer idle. So these two resources are underutilized. And also there is starvation, because if there are some other processes outside which are desperately waiting for this disk drive or printer, then they starve for these two resources, because these all the three are given to a single process right now. So this is a case of clear starvation. Okay, coming to the third condition. In the third condition, you have no preemption. So according to the no preemption for the mandatory rule for deadlock, we saw that we are not supposed to forcibly remove or deallocate resources from a process. So here we will have to do the opposite. That is, we should forcibly remove the resources from the process. See, look at this. If a process that is holding some resource requests another resource that cannot be immediately allocated to it, then all the resources currently being held are released. That is, if a process wants some other process and it is also holding some other process, okay, then what happens is when it requests for some other resources, it is also holding, right? It should not happen. Okay, so it should become selfless, and now it should release all the resources that it was holding before. Okay, so that is the concept behind this. That is, if it wants to access some resources, then it needs to release the resources that it was holding before. Okay, this is that concept. That is, your making the process release its resources, which is also preemption, right? You're making the process release its resources. So this is what it means. Now, all these preempted resources are added to a list of resources for which the process is waiting. So all the preempted resources will be added to a list of resources, and they can be used by the processes which are waiting. A process, okay, so you have preempted a process, right? That is, you have snatched the processes, you have snatched the resources from the process. So the processes will restart only when it can gain its old resources as well as the new ones that it is requesting. Preemption of resources held by some other process. So there are two cases here. Here the process is voluntarily releasing its resources because it wants some other resource, but those resources are not available right now. So it releases its already located resources. So I have termed it as by itself, or this is by others. That is, if a process wants some other resources held by some other process, then we will preempt the other process now. That is, we will make the other process release its resources and give to the particular process that I was talking about right now. Okay, so this is release of resources by the other process. This is release of resources by the current process that we are talking. Okay, so the fourth condition is circular wait. We saw that the fourth condition for a deadlock is circular wait. So we need to break the condition for circular wait to have deadlock prevention. So here the concept goes like this. You will be using an ordering concept. It is, each of the resource types will be ordered and the resources will be accessed in the order in which they are written. Okay, so for example, tape drive has been given a value 1, disk drive has been given a value 5, and printer has been given a value 12. So you can access in this particular order. That is, a process first has to access tape drive, and after it releases, then only it can ask for request for disk drive, and only then it can request for printer. So we maintain this we maintain this particular ordering in order to break the circular chain. Moving on to the next concept. Okay, deadlock avoidance. So I won't be going through all the concepts in deadlock avoidance, guys, because the majority of the concept, that is Banker's algorithm, is already covered to you all. Okay, let us see what is deadlock avoidance. So deadlock avoidance means you will be providing some additional information in prior through which you can decide if a deadlock can happen or not. So you already know what the priori information are. If you remember, you had information regarding allocated, that is, you had allocation matrix, you had max matrix, you had need matrix, you had availability matrix. So all these information are fed to the are fed right before. Okay, that is, they are fed in prior, and then based on the situation we will decide whether a deadlock can happen or not. That is through safe or unsafe sequences, if you remember, right? So this is the concept behind deadlock avoidance. Okay, okay, so you know what a safe state is. I need not tell about it. So you guys know that if you find a safe state, that means there is no possibility of deadlock occurring. Okay, and if it is an unsafe state, then there is a possibility, there can be a possibility of deadlock occurring. Okay, okay, so this is what you know this already. If a system is in safe state, then it means no deadlocks. If a system is in unsafe state, then there is a possibility of deadlock. So avoidance is ensuring that a system will never enter an unsafe state through the information that is provided to it in prior. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So this is what you know, safe and unsafe. So if it is unsafe, then there is a possibility of deadlock. Okay. Yeah. Now, there are two variations in deadlock avoidance. One is with single instance for each of the resource, and one is multiple instance. So multiple instances works through Banker's algorithm. That is, if a resource has multiple instance, then you can apply Banker's algorithm. But if a resource has only one instance, then you have to apply the concept of resource allocation graph. I'll tell you how it is applied here using a diagram. Okay, now guys, look at this particular diagram. Okay, so here these are solid edges, right? So let's not look at the solid edges that are already in fact, that is they are actually in fact, that is they are practical. That is R1 is given to P1 and P2 is requesting for R1. So this situation already exists. Now we have dotted lines over here, right? So these are called as claim edges. Okay, so they are called as claim edges. What are these claim edges? Claim edges are nothing but there is a possibility of P1 requesting for R2 in the future. Similarly, there is a possibility of P2 requesting for R2 in the future. So these are called as claim edges. Okay, so remember they are called as claim edges. Claim edges. Yeah. Pardon me for the slow writing. Okay, so these are called as claim edges, indicating that P1 and P2, which are indicated by dotted lines, indicate that they can claim this resource R2 in the future. So what we will do is we will try to convert this claim edge into resource request assignment edge. Sorry, we will convert it into assignment edge. That is, at a later point of time, this P2 will be given access to R2, right? That is P2 is now requesting for R2. That is, it may request. So let's think that P2 has been assigned R2. So what do you think? This is going to change, no? So this is this direction is going to change. This is called as assignment. So R2 is now given to P2, and this is a solid line. That means what? There is a chance of deadlock, right? You can see a deadlock here. So resource allocation graph can be used to check for deadlocks with respect to single instance of resource. Okay, so that is what. So there is a possibility of deadlock. This is a unsafe state due to presence of a cycle. Clear? Okay, moving on to the Banker's algorithm. I will skip through these slides. So know that Banker's algorithm works for multiple instances, and resource allocation graph in the previous one with respect to claim edges and assignment edges works for only single instance. Okay, so all these are clear to you. Safety algorithm, resource request, this also was uploaded. Okay, example of Banker's algorithm, the same was explained and the same was explained in the previous video. Coming to deadlock detection, guys. Okay, so here what happens is you will allow the system to perform as usual, and if there is a deadlock, then you will detect the deadlock using some detection algorithm. Okay, and then you will apply some recovery schemes to overcome the deadlock. This is the concept of deadlock detection here. Now coming to single instance. For single instance, we have resource allocation graph converted to something called as wait for graph. Okay, so you know what a resource allocation graph is, right? In resource allocation graphs, you have two nodes. One is with respect to processes, which are circles, and one is with respect to resources, which are rectangle, right? So now here in wait for graph, for deadlock detection, you will have only one node, which is with respect to process. Okay, so now how is this drawn? This is very simple. Okay, now look at the process P1 here. Okay, so what does P1 say? P1 requests for R1. One second, let me get the okay. Okay, P1 requests for R1 and then R1 requests for P2, right? So we can collapse these edges. That is, P1 requesting for R1 and R1 is assigned to P2 can now be P1 is depending on P2. This is what it means, right? If P1 wants to have R1, then R1 should be released by P2. That means what? P1 is depending on R2. You have collapsed these two edges into this edge, right? Similarly, P2 is requesting for R3 here and R3 is assigned to P5. That means P2 is dependent on R5. So this is the edge, right? Similarly, P2 is dependent on R3. P2 is dependent on R4. P3 is dependent on R4, and P3 is dependent on P4, and P4 is dependent on P1. So this is called as wait for graph. And if there exists a cycle in this graph, then that means a deadlock can occur. So we clearly see a cycle here, right? So this means a deadlock can occur. This is how you can actually detect for deadlocks if it is having single instance. That is, if a resource has only single instance, you can use the concept of wait for graph to detect deadlocks. Otherwise, you have to go according to the other variation of Banker's algorithm, which I will teach you now. Okay, now several instances of a resource type. Okay, so let me go directly to the problem here, because you guys now know how to solve Banker's algorithm, so this will be easier for you all. Okay, so now here we have some data that is given to us. We have totally 5 processes, guys, and 3 resources. A has 7 instances of resources, B has 2 instances, and C has 6 instances, right? Now you know what is allocation, and instead of max you have a request here. Instead of max you have a request here. Clear? Okay, and available, I'll show you. You now know how available is got it. There is one way to know how availability can be written. So this is clearly a matrix, and request is a new matrix that is given to you. Now just add the A instances. You have 3 plus 2, which is 5, 5 plus 2, which is 7. So total 7 out of 7 instances have been used. So 0 availability of A is there. Now what about the B? 1 plus 1 is 2. So 2 out of 2 are used. So 0 instances are available for B. Similarly for C, 3 plus 2, which is 5, 5 plus 1, which is 6. So 6 out of 6, so 0 instances for C are available right now. Okay, so this is the initial setup. Now, coming to the request. You know that requests should always be less than or equal to availability. Only you can then provide, or you can cater to the request, right? So let's first check if, okay, so I'll write here, always check if this request is less than or equal to availability. Now coming to P naught. Here also you need to find a sequence, guys. So we will start with P naught. As you know that you can start with any process, but we will have a uniform solution if you start from P naught. So request of P naught, definitely it is less than or equal to available. So definitely it means that P naught does not want, but then we compare at the same time. So request is less than or equal to available. So what does that mean? You will provide, or you will cater to the request of P naught. So after P naught uses its resources, you will have to release the allocated resource. So when you release allocated resource, what do you get, guys? You get it as 0, 1 and 0. I hope you know this. You need to add this allocation to the available, right? You get 0, 1, 0. So P naught is in the sequence. Now coming to P1. So what is the request of P1? It is 202. Can you cater to the request of P1? No. Why? Because request is definitely less than or equal to availability. So P1 is not considered. What about P2? P2 has a request 000 and the availability is 010. So you can definitely cater to the request of P2. That means what? After P2 finishes, it releases its resources. So what do you get? Sorry. So what do you get after P2 finishes off? You get it as 313. Okay, you get it as 313. Correct? Yeah. Now, so P2 is in line. What about P3? P3, once you check the request of P3 against the availability, so this is 100, which is less than 313. So when you add, so when you cater to the request of P3, P3 is added into the sequence, and then you release the resources of P3. So you get 5 to 4, right? You get 5 to 4. I hope you have gone through my video on Banker's algorithm. If you have gone through, then you will definitely understand. Next, coming to P4. What about P4, guys? So here you can, so here they have changed the sequence, but you can continue with P4, not a problem. So P4 has, I have taught you, you can go according to P4. So P4's need is less than the availability. So if you add according to the allocation, so you get it as 5 to 6. So you can have P4 here, guys, not a problem. Okay, first you can have P4. Next, after that, you can go to P1. Definitely P1's request is less than availability. So when you add, you get 7 to 6, that is equal to the initial configuration. So now if you go according to the sequence, you get it as P0, P2, P3, P4 and P1. As I said, you need not always get the same sequence. You can get different sequences. Each one of you can get a different sequence because it only depends on the order in which you pick the processor. So this is a safe sequence, and that means what? There is no deadlock detected here, right? There is no deadlock that is detected here. Clear? We will now take another example. We will take another example wherein P2 requests an additional instance, right? Okay, so look at the configuration of P2. P2 was earlier 001. So now it requests for an additional instance of type C, which is the last one, right? So 001 is given to C. So if you take the same availability, guys, okay, yeah, if you take the same availability 0, 0, 0, okay, if you take the same availability 0, 0, 0, now check P0's request against the availability. You can cater. That is why P0 is in the sequence. What about P1? Can you cater to P1's request? No, 202 is definitely greater than availability, so you cannot cater to P1. What about P2? No, you can't cater. This one? No, you can't. What about P4? No, you can't, because the availability is still 000, right? That is why. And as I said, this will be updated because P0 is being given, right? So it will be updated to 010. So if you try to match all these 4 values again 010, none of them can be allocated resources, right? That is why this results in a deadlock state. That means you have detected a deadlock here. That means deadlock exists consisting of processes P1, P2, P3 and P4. For this criteria, you have seen a deadlock. So deadlock has been detected here. This is what is the concept of deadlock. So you can identify or you can detect a deadlock for single instance using wait for graph, and for multiple instances you can use this variation of Banker's algorithm, where instead of max you have a request matrix. Okay, and it is the same process. That is, whatever you have seen in Bankers, the same thing needs to be applied here. Moving on to the next topic. Okay, so how often should you run this algorithm, detection algorithm? Because see, this is applied once every while, right? See, whenever you move on to a certain particular process, this detection algorithm is applied. So how frequently you should be applying it? You can apply frequently, but then there is a waste of CPU cycles, right? Because every time you apply detection algorithm, it consumes too much of CPU cycles. Even if you apply it once in a while, then that also has a problem, because you will miss out where the cycle has occurred. That is, there may be many cycles in the resource graph, so you won't be able to tell how many deadlock process were actually in that cycle. So even if you invoke the detection algorithm once in a while, that is also difficult to trace which deadlock processes cause the cycle. So both are not fine. So you need to find a suitable way to apply this detection algorithm. Okay. Now, recovery from deadlock. So once you have detected a deadlock, then there are ways to recover from the deadlock. So one is through process termination, guys. Okay, so one is through process termination. So one thing is, what is process termination? Process termination is nothing but aborting or killing a process, right? So what you can do is, one way is aborting all the deadlocked processes. That is, all the processes which cause the deadlock can be aborted. But there is a disadvantage here, because if you abort all the processes, then you need to restart all the processes from scratch. It is, you need to recompute from the beginning. So that is a overhead, right? And one way is to abort one process at a time. That is, you kill one process until the deadlock cycle is eliminated. That is, kill one process, check for cycle. Kill one process, check for the cycle. So stop until the cycle is also eliminated. But then here you are applying deadlock algorithm every now and then, right? So that is also a overhead. So you should find a suitable way. Now, in what ways should you, in what scenarios you should terminate a process? You cannot terminate a process just like that, right? So there are some criteria that you need to follow, or the order in which the process should be chosen, okay, to abort. Which process should be chosen to abort? So you need to decide on the priority. So if the priority of a process is high, then you should not abort it. The processes with lower priority should be aborted. Also, you should consider how long the process has computed. Suppose a process has computed for a very longest time, okay, then it is almost at the verge of its execution, right? So you are not supposed to terminate that process. And how much more time it requires to complete, that also needs to be considered. Resources the process has used, okay, so that also needs to be considered, because sometimes you have allocated all the resources to the process, and all of a sudden if you try to terminate that process, then you will have to remove the processes and again give it back at a later point of time, right? So that is also overhead. So resources process needs to complete. How many processes will be terminated? Is the process interactive or batch? So all these things should be kept in mind before terminating any process. So the other way is resource preemption, guys. So you can terminate process or you can preempt a resource, okay? So the first task is to select a victim. So selecting a victim is with respect to resources or process. That is, you can select which resources to remove from a process or which process to remove from the resources, okay? So this is with respect to selecting a victim. And here also there is an overhead with respect to cost. You should select a victim such that the cost is minimized. See, for example, if you are deciding to remove a process from the resource, right, then you should also see that how much cost will it take to again put that process back into work at a later point of time. Okay, so that cost factor also should be considered here. Now coming to rollback. Suppose, let's say that if a resource is forcibly removed from a process, then what should you do to the process? Definitely the process cannot continue now because the resources have been removed from it. So it should either go to a safe state or you need to start the process from scratch. That is, you need to restart. So that is also overhead. You need to, the process or the operating system should think over it. Okay, coming to starvation. I was talking about victim, right? So what is this victim? You need to select a process. Which process should be now, or which process should be deallocated with the resources, right? So it should not so happen that you always pick the same process. Let's say based on a priority, you start picking the process based on a priority. So always the targeted ones are the processes with low priority, right? So it is not fair, right? You cannot always choose a process with low priority, because it will be always, it will go into a starvation mode, because every time it will only be targeted. Same process may always be picked as a victim just because it had low priority. No, it's not fair. So you should include a point in the previous one, that is in the process termination, you include a point with respect to the number of rollbacks. So the process that have had the maximum number of rollbacks should not be selected as a victim from now on. So the process that had least number of rollbacks could be considered as a victim for process termination. So all these points need to be kept in mind before recovering from the deadlock. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, guys.